are talking Fall of Grace, directed by Michael Crumb, and this was actually written by Gerald Crumb, who also stars in this movie. So, the synopsis of this movie reads, a troubled couple's lives descend into violence and madness after a demonic entity takes their daughter. So, how can I better describe Fall of Grace in its cinematic form? I can tell you this much. This is a bunch of scenes that are horror related, put in a kind of cocktail mixer, shaken up, poured out, and there's your film. So this is a weird music video type horror film. Let's talk about the good stuff first of all. First thing for me, there is some imagination on display with this film. It's obviously a low budget film, but they've done some really kind of quite neat tricks with some of the kind of the visual and the kind of the video elements here, how they're kind of displaying possessed people, kind of just using both makeup, CGI, and kind of just camera tricks as well, and kind of having this kind of shaky, people kind of shaking violently and stuff while they're obviously possessed, things like that. That was all kind of quite imaginative. This movie has got quite good music in it. And quite good audio effects, although there is a problem with some of the audio as well. But there is some quite effective music and some quite effective kind of sound effects as well. And like I've said, it has some quite fun original ideas. If you like watching a Marilyn Manson video, watch one for an hour and a half and then see what you think. So let's talk about the negatives here. So as you can probably guess what I'm alluding to, This film is nothing. There's nothing here. It's just a bunch of scenes that are kind of horror related. There's really no through narrative in this film, and we have this kind of like, this family kind of trying to kind of defeat the devil or whatever. But there's nothing to follow. There's no real clear through narrative in this film. It's just a bunch of what they think are cool looking scenes with the loosest possible story threads, and even then it's kind of like, it just seems to go off on different tangents here and there. This film is extremely scattershot. I mean, I don't want to say it's hard to follow, it's obviously quite a basic plot, but it's just kind of, it's presented in a way that it doesn't make sense, and you lose interest ultimately. Your kind of mind starts to wander, despite the fact that I think what is on screen is very imaginative and kind of definitely has some visual flair, and that's the thing with this film. It's a low budget film, but they've done a good job visually of making some interesting scenes. But the story elements here are the problem, because the narrative, or the lack of it basically, really makes you just lose interest in this film, because there's no clear storyline in it, and it just seems to be a bunch of things that are happening that seem unconnected. I mentioned in the audio that there is a little bit of audio problem here as well. Some of the kind of the dialogue sounds particularly kind of muffled. The acting, there's not a whole lot of dialogue, if we're completely honest, and it's so hard to judge the acting because the scenes seem just so jumbled up, so it kind of makes it difficult to really kind of settle down and kind of really judge like a number of scenes in a row. But the acting wasn't brilliant, from what I kind of could ascertain. Such a bizarre film. I mentioned like a kind of Marilyn Manson video. This feels like a music video. It's just a kind of bunch of kind of cool, horror scenes that are kind of spliced together with no real kind of narrative. They're just meant to kind of look shocking and kind of be, wow, that's cool visual. That's basically what this film is, but with nothing. There's no real story here. So I think the filmmakers have got very excited. They've had all these kind of cool ideas that they kind of want to put on screen that sound cool. Now this will look really great. But the problem is here they've neglected the most basic issues, and that is a story with characters that you care about, characters that you relate to, and having a narrative that the audience can basically follow through and not be kind of either lost or just lose interest. So that is the kind of the bare bones structure of a good story, and then there's kind of the other visual elements basically then plus that. So now you've seen very basic films with no special effects, even horror and genre films, but they've told a good story. And this movie is literally the opposite. It basically has some imaginative effects, you know, well done for kind of making this stuff on a kind of a low budget. But man, it just struggled to sit through because there's just nothing here to kind of like latch onto as a kind of a story, as a kind of element. It's way too much kind of slow-mo, way too many kind of irrelevant scenes of kind of like gangs fighting and stuff and God knows what else. It's just an absolute kind of mess of a movie, but with some creative ideas in it, which I guess makes it frustrating to watch almost more so. If it was completely crap all the way through, you would just write it off. The frustrating thing here is you can definitely see that there is some visual element that definitely would be interesting if it was in an interesting film. But as it stands at the moment, I cannot recommend this film in any way because it just is not an interesting film to watch. So, despite the fact I feel if this maybe could be re-edited in some way, or just maybe a lesson for the filmmakers for the next movie, there may be some good stuff in the future. But as it stands, maybe some good visual flares here and there. If you like watching a music video in the background, maybe watch it like that. 4 out of 10, that's as best as I can give, and I feel I'm being generous because the fundamentals are not here with this movie. 4 out of 10, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time.